The air in the hospital corridor was thick with the scent of antiseptic and fear, a decade ago. Amina Al-Farsi, then a brilliant young academic focused on international development, stood frozen by a single sight, a small boy lying on a cot, silent, his face half-bandaged. His breathing was shallow, steady, yet utterly fragile. In her hand, Amina clutched a sleek leather briefcase containing enough capital to purchase the critical medical supplies the ward desperately needed. But the local warlord demanded an exorbitant criminal bribe for safe passage. Amina negotiated. She cited international law, ethical guidelines, and institutional policies. She pleaded for transparency, for accountability, for a system free of corruption. She argued the principle, the rigid academic code that dictated engaging with criminals only validated their corruption. She stood on her ethics. She did not pay the bribe. She walked away, the heavy leather briefcase, a symbol of wealth and potential, feeling impossibly heavy. Later, the boy died. The memory returned in fragments. The boy's quiet, steady breathing, which her inaction had condemned, the glint of the warlord's gold tooth, the realization that her moral perfection had resulted in human failure. This event cemented a trauma, the belief that she possessed the knowledge to save lives but lacked the necessary ruthlessness to execute. Now, 38, Dr. Amina Al-Farsi meticulously wiped down her sleek leather briefcase with an antiseptic wipe, her movements sharp, almost surgical. This ritual, repeated countless times daily, was an obsessive need to cleanse the symbol of that past, unforgivable moral failure. Her body was rigid, her movements precise, revealing a deep nervous tension masked by an impeccable professional exterior. Her entire life had become a relentless, pathological pursuit of the zero-error margin, a belief that perfect, ruthless logic prevents catastrophic human failure. She sat in a sterile, modern apartment in Manila, a safe house chosen for its high-speed connectivity and anonymity. Sheikh Zayed 45, the charismatic mastermind of the Grand Plan, outlined his vision. He spoke of abstract ideals, of justice and a restructured world order. He referenced the inevitable civilian cost with a chilling, detached casualness. Amina, usually guarded, felt a sudden flicker of pathological anger, not at the violence itself, but at the sheer imprecision of his theology. "The plan is not complete, Sheikh," she stated, her voice flat, academic, devoid of any personal inflection. "Your timeline is flawed. The variables of human movement are too high. We must choose targets that maximize impact while minimizing unpredictable variables. This is a logistics problem, not a theological one." Her delusion of control asserted itself. She believed that by making the plan flawless, by perfecting the details, she could redeem her past inaction. She could control chaos itself. Amina physically transformed to match her new, cold purpose. She adopted a severe style, tailored, expensive, but utterly nondescript professional clothing. Her hair, once free, was now pulled back tightly, emphasizing the sharp, logical lines of her face. The look was designed for absolute competence and functional invisibility, the cold exterior masking profound emotional turmoil. She worked relentlessly in secure safe houses, sustained by caffeine and the obsessive pursuit of data purity. The sheer complexity of the logistics, routing, timing, acquisition, served as a perfect intellectual anesthetic for her suppressed guilt. She meticulously verified every code and document, believing perfect information was the only true defense against the world's inherent chaos. She found an old photograph of herself from her academic days, smiling, hopeful, soft. She tore the photograph in two with clinical precision, shredding the pieces. That person was gone. Her purpose was now concrete, perfection through destruction. Months passed. The grand plan took shape under Amina's meticulous hand. Every detail was mapped, every timeline precise. The only remaining task was the acquisition of one highly specialized technical schematic, which required Zaid to contact a high-risk operative. He scheduled the meeting in an open-air market in a crowded city, relying on his charisma and instinct. Amina felt the familiar sharp stab of anxiety, triggered by the sight of a single misplaced pen on her otherwise perfect desk. It was the flaw in the immediate environment, reflecting the flaw in Zaid's planning. She checked his meeting protocol one last time. "Sheikh," she stated, her voice tight with nervous tension. "The meeting spot is a logistical error. It introduces too many random variables. I have calculated 5 safer rendezvous points, with minimized exposure and optimized escape routes. Zaid's voice, calm and unyielding, crackled back. Trust the will of God, doctor. Your logic is cold. My judgment is certain. Amina's hands gripped the desk. She could not force his compliance. She controlled the logistics, but Zaid controlled the human element, the volatile variable she could neither calculate nor eliminate. The unresolved pain of her original moral failure resurfaced. She was powerless over the actions of others. The flaw was not in the data, but in the man. Amina accepted the rejection of her warning with the icy detachment of a scientist observing a failed experiment. Zaid's decision to prioritize judgment over logic was simply another variable error that had to be accounted for, not mourned. Her commitment to the zero-error margin was now absolute. She had to ensure that even if Zaid failed, the system, her flawless logistics, would survive. Her work environment transformed into a sanctuary of data. The walls of the safe house in Yemen were covered not with political flags, but with complex transit schematics and encrypted communication protocols. She lived entirely within the digital space she had created. The messy, unpredictable reality of human interaction was relegated to Sheikh Zaid. Amina dealt only with the pure, clean certainty of data flow. She found a deep, chilling solace in the mathematics of destruction. The more complex the routing, the calmer she became. The intricacies served as a perfect intellectual anesthetic for the suppressed guilt of her past inaction. She rarely spoke, communicating almost exclusively through short, hyper-precise, encrypted messages. Her routine was rigid: wake, cleanse the briefcase, consume copious amounts of black coffee, and check the network for external anomalies. This life was not a sacrifice. It was a purification. She had failed to save the boy because she adhered to messy, flawed human ethics. She would succeed now by embracing absolute, flawless amorality. The logistics of the grand plan entered its critical acquisition phase. Amina directed operatives across 3 continents, coordinating the purchase and shipment of specialized technical components. This required the manipulation of legitimate supply chains, a complex weave of shell companies, false customs declarations, and meticulously timed deliveries designed to look like routine industrial importations. Her only non-essential communication was a brief, coded exchange with a retired academic colleague, ostensibly about a long-forgotten journal submission. The true purpose was to acquire a single, crucial piece of technical schematic, the final, detailed blueprint needed for the attack on the infrastructure target. She handled this interaction with the practiced charm of her academic past, the cold exterior masking emotional turmoil perfectly. The colleague never suspected that the data she was asking for was the foundation of a catastrophic act of terror. The acquisition was successful. Amina received the data packet and immediately began integrating it into the master schedule. The final architectural plans revealed vulnerabilities that exceeded even her expectations. She felt a surge of cold, clinical triumph. The plan was not just viable, it was inevitable. However, the strain of managing chaos began to show in small, physical lapses. One evening, after a 20-hour work session, she found a single pen out of alignment on her desk. It was tilted perhaps 10 degrees off the perpendicular, a minuscule imperfection in her environment. The sight triggered a momentary panic, a vestige of the boy's quiet breathing, which she quickly suppressed. She immediately checked her reflection. Severe hair, sharp eyes. She was still in control. The flaw was external. She doubled down, convinced that only absolute rigidity could maintain order. She began to view Zaid's reliance on instinct with genuine intellectual contempt. His decision to meet the high-risk operative in the crowded marketplace, relying on tribal sense instead of calculated risk, became a running, unacceptable flaw in her mental map. The meeting must be relocated. Her next encrypted message to Zaid read, stark and without preamble. Market variables introduce 85% exposure risk above protocol beta parameters. I have calculated 5 alternative zones. Zaid's response was delayed and dismissive. The operative fears empty zones. Trust the crowd. Trust the process. Amina stared at the response on her screen. It was illogical. It was sloppy. It was human. The unresolved pain of her moral failure years ago morphed into pathological rage at his arrogance. She had created a perfect system, yet the one element she could not control, the human variable, was willfully destroying it. She had to choose. abandon the flawless schedule, or accept Zaid's catastrophic risk. She chose to trust the schedule. She would allow the meeting to proceed, betting that her system was robust enough to absorb even his incompetence. She had calculated the cost of the crime, but she had failed to calculate the cost of working with flawed men. Amina was in her secure communication room, watching the scheduled acquisition time tick past on her encrypted screen. She saw the data spike, an anomaly, then a sudden massive drop in Sheikh Zaid's communication signal strength. The chaos she had predicted, the chaos Zaid had willfully invited, had arrived with brutal swiftness. She did not flinch. She did not yell. Her face, framed by her tightly pulled back hair, remained a mask of icy composure. The disruption data was undeniable. Zaid's open-air meeting spot, relying on instinct instead of protocol, had been compromised. His signal vanished entirely, a clean cut, indicating a capture by a professional counterterrorism unit. Amina observed the disruption with a strange cold sense of vindication. Her logic had been flawless. The human variable had failed the system. The price of his theological arrogance was his own downfall. The moment required action. Amina immediately began executing Protocol Omega, the automated, synchronized destruction of all digital and paper trails. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, precise, frantic, yet completely devoid of panic. This was her final, perfect logistics plan, securing the integrity of the data and guaranteeing her own operational silence. The process unfolded beautifully across the screens. Files shredded, drives wiped, communications scrambled. She was ensuring that even if she were taken, the architecture of the conspiracy would remain untraceable. The door to her secure room exploded inward, filling the air with dust and shouts. Local security forces, followed by two stern, clean-cut figures, identified only by the efficiency of their movements, flooded the room. Amina made no move to resist. Her hands rested calmly on the keyboard, her posture straight, her eyes fixed on the final sequence running across her monitor. She ignored the weapons pointed at her, ignoring the shouted commands. She was waiting for the final confirmation. As the handcuffs clicked onto her wrists, cold, heavy, and absolute, she glanced at the screen. The final deletion sequence was complete. The system was clean. The data was secure. She had failed to save the boy years ago because she refused to engage with corruption. She had joined the conspiracy to regain